Sanctions have been imposed on 82 individuals and 29 companies. German payment provider Wirecard went bankrupt on Tuesday.
Russia has launched an unprecedented disinformation campaign against
Billions of dollars have been found in various offshore accounts.
Welcome to Integrity Insights, the Berlin Risk podcast. Hello and welcome everyone to the second episode of the Integrity Insights podcast, in which we are going to delve into a very exciting topic that we have actually covered quite extensively recently in our article titled "The Rise of Disinformation in OSINT." It's a topic that is can be very general, but we have actually been focusing on I think relatively underexplored subset of disinformation, usually referred to as disinformation for hire or disinformation as a service, whereby malicious actors or companies are selling services such as reputation promotion or reputation destruction, which we think are type of activities that professionals in our field should be definitely familiar with. And since we have been seeing these type of operations coming out of the former Soviet Union, specifically from countries such as Russia or Ukraine, we thought it would be a good idea to discuss this with my colleague and a managing partner at Berlin Risk, Vlada Tkach, who has a lot of experience with not just this region specifically, but also with these type of investigations more broadly. So this should be a very interesting, very exciting conversation, which I'm personally really looking forward to. And so without further ado, I bring you Vlada Tkach. Hi Vlada, thanks for joining me today.
Hello, Philip.
So before we jump into today's topic, could you please tell us a little bit about your background?
My background is in journalism. I graduated from the journalism department of Kiev University, and I worked for 3 years for BBC World Service in London, the Ukrainian service, and then a couple of years for a magazine that is a part of Financial Times Business. It's called Investors Chronicle in London. And education-wise, it's international security, so it wasn't very related to my last job as an equity reporter. And from about 2004, 2005, I started working for the due diligence sector.
So, in other words, you have almost 20 years of experience in due diligence.
Indeed.
Wow. Well, that is great, as it means that you are perfectly positioned to help me tackle today's topic, which is disinformation. And as I outlined in the intro to this episode, we are interested in this subset of disinformation known as disinformation as a service. And maybe, Vlada, we could start with discussing this question of geography. Why do you think that so many companies or actors active in this field are running their operations outside of the post-Soviet region?
As more than one reason, of course. After the collapse of communism and the rise of the oligarch economy in the 1990s during the wave of privatizations in these countries, many of these oligarchs either acquired or founded media to advance their interests in politics, but also in order to destroy competition. I'm not saying all media and all journalists were up for sale, of course, but many people working in such publications were used to writing so-called contracted articles, i.e. paid for. And paid for, I mean not as a fee for an article, but actually paid for by people who ordered them. And these articles often contain the so-called compromat, or information that could compromise the subject. And some publications, especially internet-based and especially in recent years, made it their business model, either to publish articles for money, whether positive or negative, or to publish unsolicited articles in order to get paid and then to pull them off. It's quite cynical, actually.
And Vlada, would you say that this, what you've just described, applies specifically to Ukraine or also to other countries in the region?
I think we see this type of journalism still persistent. But what I cannot say is how many of these companies that you are talking about offering this type of services to make or break somebody's reputation. I cannot really tell how spread they are in Central Asia. I would think Russia and Ukraine would be the two main suppliers.
Okay, so I understood why we are seeing these practices in countries like Ukraine or Russia, that it has these deep historical reasons. But I mean, as you know, we have been seeing these activities from these actors all across the globe. I mean, they are running these operations from these countries, but they are really conducting this business globally. So how do you view that development?
Well, first the caveat, not all the media are like this. We're talking about a particular segment, There are also high-class, uncorrupted and very courageous journalists in Russia and Ukraine. So let's not taint everyone with that. But for those who do work in this field, and they're not necessarily journalists, they could be PR people or other type of professionals, let's put it this way. Obviously, the reason is money. You work with a market that can pay. So if there are customers with money and they are based outside of Ukraine and Russia, because there is perhaps more money outside of Ukraine and Russia in some ways, then that's where they would be targeting their services too. There is a limit to how much you can earn in certain countries. So international expansion is always the way to go.
And just going back for a second to this topic of this very difficult media terrain in the post-Soviet world, where there's so many different interests, and the media work in a way that it's just very difficult to find reliable information. And I wonder, you have spent a lot of time researching, working on due diligence assignments in the region. How do you navigate a media landscape like this?
When you're looking at the internet outlets, you look at the websites, how long have they been in existence? Does this website have a history of such operations? Some sites are known to specialize in that type of thing, even if they're actually long in existence. Is there a known affiliation to a particular business or political group? Is the ownership of the website is transparent? Where is it based? Because some of these websites, for example, they would be nominally based in Ukraine, but if you try to look at where they're registered, there would be some kind of offshore jurisdiction, and you would never know who's behind. Do the articles published there contain very wild allegations? Are they supported by photographs and documents that could be either doctored or leaked by certain interested parties? The information that you wouldn't just define in the public domain, even if you're a very good OSINT investigator. You have to be very careful when you see information that seems out of this world, because if it seems like it, it is more often than not is not true. And also you look at other sort of very simple markers, such as the author, a no-name article, or an article whose author has no previous record, or whose previous record is only consisting of this type of publications, this type of scandalous revelations, would be a red light. So when you look at the kind of constellation of all these factors together, obviously, ideally coupled with a knowledge of the region, so that you actually understand the background, the politics, the affiliation and associations. It is, I don't say it's easy to tell what is fake and what is not, but it's easier to distinguish the truth from the untruths. But of course, technological advancement brings new challenges, and some fakes look really convincing, and you can find articles that or reports, whatever, that look very real, but turned out to be very unreal.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point that you are making, Vlada, and I just wanted to add that this is not just specific to the post-Soviet space. We are seeing this more and more really globally, whether it's in the US or in Europe or in other parts of the world. We are seeing more of these very specifically almost micro-targeted disinformation operations where we see news websites that are created specifically for the purpose to publish articles damaging to someone's reputation or promotion of someone's reputation. And usually those articles are then shared via social media accounts that are also specifically created for this purpose, and they are all part of this one disinformation operation. It's like a package that these operators sell for as little as a couple of hundreds of dollars on the dark web. And it's really important. It's a really important topic for due diligence investigators, that they need to be aware of these tactics and how to spot disinformation like that.
But what I wanted to say is that, because my background is in journalism, like yours, the rule that we had long time ago in the BBC was that any piece of information had to come from at least two sources. I have no doubt they have the same rule now, probably more. And I think in our work, it's even more important that you base your research on more than one, two, or in our case, many more sources. Any research we do, ideally you would support public domain research with source inquiries, but that is talking to people who know, but also simply public domain research on its own, you have to check as many sources as possible. You have to make sure that the information is consistent. You also have to make sure the sources you use are not simply reprinting one another. Because what tends to happen is this piece of misinformation or disinformation, depends on the context, is often, it originates on one website, but then it is disseminated, reprinted on other websites. And sometimes it's done copy-paste, and sometimes it's slightly modified to look like it's a different information. But very often it's not. So you have to be able to tell that there is no other source. Sometimes you will have five different websites, but this is the same source. And you have to make sure that your sources come from different domains, so to speak. When I say domains, I mean not just media, but if we're talking about some sort of investigation, quite often you can find legal records, at least in Ukraine, for example, and in Russia as well, I think used to be, where you can look up if a certain investigation, there is a trace of certain investigation. Some information will be blanked out. There may not be all information available, but you can find some records that would confirm that what you are seeing is based in reality. So you would look at different sources at the same time. You would look at media, you would look at legal databases, you would look at corporate databases. Ideally, you would supplement it with human source inquiries. And only after such an encompassing research, you can be relatively secure that the information you are seeing and therefore reporting to the client, in our case, is correct.
Okay, so checking with multiple sources, that sounds like a very reasonable advice. But let me challenge you with this. And this is a real life example, because we have been seeing this, that some of these companies even offer for a small fee to file a criminal complaint against an individual or a company. So then if you check the article against a legal database, then you will even find a criminal complaint that would, quote unquote, confirm the story in the fake media, which this I personally found very disturbing. And yeah, I wonder how would you then deal with that?
I think knowledge of context and knowledge of the jurisdiction you're working in is very important. For example, in Ukraine, you really can file a criminal complaint, and there would be some record of, in some cases, there would be an investigation open. But you have to see, is it just open, filed and open, and then nothing happens? And possibly closed. Yeah, because nobody reports when it's closed. Articles tend to report when it's open. But you can quite often see that there was no activity at all. Or there was actually a formal closure, it's just not reported. So understanding how easy it is to file this complaint in certain jurisdiction is very important to know how it works, that anyone can file a complaint about the alleged, not about an individual, but alleged fact of offense. And then the authorities are supposed to act and see if there was an offense or no offense. So yeah, understanding of the context, understanding of the legal environment, court environment, independence of courts, of court system. This is also why, of course, in certain jurisdictions, you tend to mistrust even legal records. This is why you have to try and get it from as many sources as possible. Intuition helps. I find the experience, knowledge, but also intuition. When you look at it for many years, you develop a sixth sense and you feel when something smells fishy. I don't even know how else to explain it. And you dig and dig and dig as much as you can. This is not to say that you can always get to the bottom of things. It is not always possible, especially when you are actually you are operating with legal constraints. You cannot hack websites. You, as an investigator, cannot use illegal means, and you're working with people who are using illegal means, or let's say, unlawful, corrupt tools. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, and you just work and check and use your knowledge and your intuition, and you come up with conclusions and caveats as well.
Thank you, Vlada. Those are some great insights. Let me just ask you one last thing before I let you go. I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning of this interview that you have almost 2 decades of experience in this field of investigations. And I wonder, do you have the impression that the way this disinformation or fake information spreads has changed dramatically over those 2 last decades or so?
Of course, it has changed. The technological advancements, the pervasive nature of the internet, of course, it has changed. Everything has become so much easier. Putting a fake piece of information on a website for somebody who knows how to operate these things is really simple. Yeah, 20 years ago, you dealt with printed records. Yeah, with articles whose reach was much more narrow. Yeah, there was a certain number of copies printed, and that was it. Now you're dealing with different jurisdictions, with different media. It has changed completely. And you also have some very far-flung corners, such as dark web, where information is not as available as if simply putting it into a Google search engine. So it's a constant challenge, and it's a challenge that's getting more and more complicated every day. But I still do think that nothing can beat expertise of a human who knows the country and the context that they're looking at.
And on this rather optimistic note, I thank you, Vlada, for joining me today, and I wish you a very nice rest of your day.
Thank you.